We've come so far with these two. From a CEO drowning in debt to a farmer planting corn at dawn. From a woman making chili paste alone to a wife building a business with her husband. And now they were about to discover that the life they'd chosen wasn't just changing them. It was changing everyone who saw it. The harvest celebration was set for Saturday afternoon. Jack and Tu Tien had spent the week preparing. They'd expanded the herb beds one more time, just to have enough fresh greens to show off. Tu Tien had cooked for 2 days straight. Spring rolls with vegetables from their garden, grilled pork marinated in lemongrass they'd grown themselves, sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves, and of course, that chili paste that had become something of a legend among the restaurant owners Jack now supplied. The table was set on the porch. Mismatched chairs borrowed from neighbours. Plates that didn't all match but were clean and ready. Wind chimes singing in the breeze. The corn was waist-high now, green and strong. The farm looked like what it was, a place where hard work met hope, and something good grew from it. Jack's mother was supposed to arrive at 3 p.m. Uncle Dung said he'd drive her. Grandma Nung was coming too, excited to see what her connections had created. But at 1:30 p.m., 2.5 hours early, Jack heard the car. He was in the field, checking the irrigation lines. Tu Tien was in the kitchen, finishing the last of the cooking. They both stopped when they heard the engine. Too early, wrong rhythm, multiple car doors closing. Jack walked toward the gate, wiping dirt from his hands. His mother got out first. She was moving better these days. The rest in the countryside had done her good. Uncle Dung climbed out of the driver's side, grinning that grin that meant he knew something Jack didn't. Then Grandma Nung emerged from the back seat. And then, here's where everything shifted. A young man stepped out of a second car that had pulled up behind them. Jack recognized him immediately. Vinh, his former employee. The one who'd quit when the company was sinking, who'd taken his family matters and disappeared. But Vinh wasn't dressed for business. He wore jeans and a simple shirt, and he was carrying a folder. Not the professional kind from the company, but something more personal. Handwritten notes visible through the clear plastic. "Vinh?" Jack said, confused. "What are you—" "Jack," his mother interrupted, walking forward. Her voice had that tone, the one that meant she'd been planning something. "I asked him to come. We all did." Uncle Dung nodded. "He's been asking about you, about the farm, about what you're doing here." Grandma Nong came up beside them. "And we thought, well, perhaps it's time he saw for himself." Vinh stepped forward, awkward but earnest. Jack, I'm sorry for showing up like this, but I need to talk to you about what you're building here." Jack looked at Tu Tien, who'd come out of the kitchen, apron still on, wooden spoon in hand. She gave him that look that meant, "Your call, but I think we should listen." "Okay," Jack said slowly. "Let's sit. Talk." They gathered on the porch, too many people for the chairs they'd set up, so some stood, some sat on the steps. Tu Tien brought water for everyone, then stayed close to Jack, her presence steady. Vinh opened his folder. Inside were printouts, articles about urban farming, small-scale agriculture, sustainable business models, pages of notes in his handwriting, calculations, plans. "After I left the company," Vinh began, "I went home to help my father. He's getting older, can't manage the family land alone anymore. It's just a small plot, similar size to this." He gestured at Jack's farm, and I thought I'd help him for a few months, then find another office job. But then he paused, looking around at the farm, the corn, the herb beds, the simple beauty of it. "Then my father told me about you. He'd heard from someone at the market how Jack sold his house to keep his farm, how you were supplying restaurants now, growing your own food, making it work." Vinh looked directly at Jack. And I thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too. Maybe that's not crazy. Maybe that's the smartest thing anyone's done. Jack's mother spoke up, her voice soft. Vinh came to see me last week. Asked if I thought you'd be willing to talk to him. Show him how you did it. And I thought, why not invite him to the celebration? Let him see what's possible. Uncle Dung added, the boy wants to learn, not just farming, how to make the choice you made, how to walk away from what doesn't fit and build what does. Grandma Nung smiled, and I told him, the best teacher is the one who's walking the path himself, not someone who read about it, someone living it. Jack sat back, processing. Vinh, who'd been good at his job, reliable, smart, wanted to learn farming, wanted to choose dirt over boardrooms, just like Jack had. What about your family? Jack asked. They okay with this? My father wants it, Vinh said. My mother's scared, but she's scared of everything. My wife... He pulled out his phone, showed a photo of a young woman and a baby. She said if I can make it work, she'll support me. But I need to know it can work. I need to see it. Tu Tien spoke for the first time. How big is your family's land? About 1.5 hectares. We've been growing rice, but the margins are terrible. Too much competition from large farms. Specialty crops, Tu Tien said immediately. Like us. Herbs, vegetables that restaurants need fresh. The same model Grandma Nung connected us with. Vinh leaned forward. Would that really work? Is there enough demand? Jack and Tu Tien exchanged a look. Then Jack stood up. Come with me, he said. I'll show you. Jack walked Vinh through the farm the way Grandma Nung had walked it a month ago. Not as a tour, but as a testament. This is where we started, Jack said, pointing to the original herb beds. Just cilantro and basil. Enough to supply one restaurant twice a week. That was our entire business model. Vinh took notes, actually writing things down like he used to in meetings. Then we added mint, Vietnamese coriander, sawtooth. 3 restaurants now. Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, deliveries. Jack kept walking. These rows here, that's the expansion. We planted these 2 weeks ago. By next month, we'll be supplying 5 restaurants and a small grocery store. How much do you make? Vinh asked, then caught himself. Sorry, it's a fair question, Jack interrupted. We clear enough to pay our expenses, save a little, and reinvest in the farm. We're not rich, but we're not drowning either. And we eat better than we ever did in the city. Tu Tien had followed them out, and she added, the real difference is control. We decide when to work, what to grow, who to sell to. Nobody's cancelling our contract because their budget changed. Nobody's laying us off because the economy shifted. Vinh nodded, absorbing this. Then he asked the question Jack had been waiting for. But what about the hard parts, the risks? What happens when crops fail or buyers drop you or when everything goes wrong at once? Jack finished. It happens. It will happen. But here's what I learned. He stopped walking, turned to face Vinh directly. When I ran the company, one bad quarter could destroy everything. One lost contract, one employee leaving, one client not paying. It all cascaded. The whole thing was built on things I couldn't control. But here, he gestured at the field. If one crop fails, we have others. If one restaurant stops buying, we have more. If we have a bad week, we plant again. The work is harder, but the foundation is more solid. Vinh was quiet for a moment. Then he said, at the company, I felt like I was always one mistake away from disaster. Is it different here? Tu Tien answered before Jack could. You're always one season away from a new start. That hit Vin visibly. He wrote it down. They walked back to the porch where everyone else was waiting. Jack's mother had been watching the whole time, and when they returned, she stood up. "Jack," she said, "I need to tell you something. I should have said it weeks ago, but I wasn't sure how." Everyone went quiet. "When you sold the house and kept this farm, I told you I was proud, and I was. But I didn't tell you why it mattered so much to me." She looked around at the land, at Tu Tien, at the life they'd built. "Your father and I, we spent our whole lives chasing security, better jobs, bigger house, more savings, and we got it. We achieved it, but we never had peace." Her voice cracked slightly. "Watching you choose this, choose less money but more life, it was like watching someone break a curse I didn't even know we were under. And now Vin is here, wanting to learn the same thing. And I think," she turned to Vin, "I think there are more people like you. People tired of the race. People who'd choose dirt if they knew it was allowed." Uncle Dong cleared his throat. "She's right. I've been talking to people. Farmers who sold their land to developers and regret it. Young people who hate their office jobs but think farming is backward. They need to see what you've built. Need to know it's possible." Grandma Nong added, "That's why I brought my notebook today. Not just for you, Jack. For anyone who's ready to try." She pulled it out, held it up. "These connections, they can help 10 farms, 20 farms. There's demand, there's need. What's missing is people willing to do the work." Jack felt something shifting. This wasn't just about his farm anymore. This wasn't just about surviving or succeeding. This was becoming something bigger. "What are you saying?" he asked, looking at his mother, at Uncle Dung, at Grandma Nung. His mother spoke. "I'm saying, what if this harvest celebration isn't just a thank you dinner? What if it's the first meeting, the first gathering of people who want to build this kind of life?" Vin stepped forward. "I'll come. I'll bring my father. And I know 2 other families from my village who've been talking about the same thing." Uncle Dung nodded. "My neighbour's son. He's been working in Saigon, miserable. I'll invite him." Grandma Nung smiled. "I know at least 5 people." Jack looked at Tu Tien. She was smiling. That quiet smile that meant she'd been thinking the same thing but waiting for him to catch up. "You knew about this," Jack said to her. "Your mother called me last week," Tu Tien admitted. "Asked what I thought. I said if people want to learn, we should teach. We learned from others. We should pass it on." Jack took a breath. Then another. This was big. Bigger than just their farm. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the life they'd chosen wasn't meant to stay small. "Okay," he said. "Okay, let's do it, but..." He held up a hand. "We do it right. We don't sell people a dream. We tell them the truth, the hard parts, the failures, the days when your back hurts and the heat is brutal and you wonder if you made a terrible mistake." "That's exactly what they need to hear," Vin said. "The real version, not the romantic one." Jack's mother came over and hugged him. "This is what I wanted for you all along," she whispered. "Not just happiness, purpose." When she pulled back, everyone was looking at Jack and Tu Tien, waiting. "All right," Jack said. "Let's set the table. Let's eat. And then let's talk about what comes next." The meal was everything a harvest celebration should be. They ate on the porch as the sun moved across the sky, turning everything golden. The spring rolls were perfect. Vegetables crisp, wrapper translucent, dipping sauce tangy with lime and chili. The pork was tender, fragrant with lemongrass and garlic. The sticky rice, still warm, had that perfect chew. And the chili paste, Grandma Nung took one bite and declared it better than anything she'd tasted in 40 years. But the real feast was the conversation. Vinh asked questions. How much seed to buy? Where to find buyers? How to price fairly without underselling yourself? Jack and Tu Tien answered everything, holding nothing back. Uncle Dong talked about soil quality. Grandma Nung shared contact after contact, writing names and numbers on napkins when she ran out of space in her notebook. And Jack's mother just watched, smiling in that way mothers do when they see their children become who they were meant to be. After the meal, as they cleared dishes, Vinh made a decision. I'm doing it, he said suddenly. I'm going to convert my father's rice field. Start with herbs, maybe some specialty vegetables. If you'll help me, not do it for me, just teach me. I think I can make it work. Jack set down the plate he was holding. I'll help. We both will. He glanced at Tu Tien, who nodded. But you need to understand, this isn't a backup plan. You can't do this halfway. If you choose farming, you choose all of it. The early mornings, the uncertainty, the whole thing. I know, Vinh said. That's what I want. Something that's all mine. Success or failure, at least it'll be mine. Uncle Dung stood up. Then we'll help you properly. I have equipment I'm not using. A tiller, some hand tools. They're yours if you want them. Grandma Nong added, and I'll introduce you to Min. If Jack vouches for you, Min will give you a chance. I vouch for him, Jack said immediately. Vin's a hard worker, always was. Tu Tien touched Vin's arm gently. Come back next week. Stay a few days. Work with us. See what the daily reality is before you commit everything. Vin's eyes got bright. Not with tears exactly. With something bigger. Recognition that this wasn't just possible. It was happening. Thank you, he said. All of you. I don't know how to... You don't need to thank us, Jack's mother interrupted. You thank us by succeeding, by choosing the life you want. That's the thanks we need. As the sun started to set, they all moved to the field. Just standing there together, looking at what Jack and Tu Tien had built, the corn swaying in the evening breeze, the herb beds arranged in neat rows, the small porch with its mismatched chairs, the kitchen window glowing warm. It wasn't much. Not by city standards, not by the measures Jack used to value things, but it was everything. Uncle Dung spoke first. You know what this is? This is what we all forgot was possible. Working with our hands, building something real, living instead of just surviving. Grandma Nung nodded. And now others will remember too, because of you two. Jack's mother came to stand beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Your father would have loved this, she said quietly. He always talked about retiring to the countryside, but we never did it. Too scared, too comfortable in our discomfort. She squeezed his shoulder. You were braver than we were. I wasn't brave, Jack said. I was desperate. Same thing sometimes, his mother replied. The important thing is what you built from that desperation. Tu Tien slipped her hand into Jack's. They stood there together as the last light faded. Husband and wife, farmers, teachers now apparently. People who'd chosen dirt and found gold in it. Vinh broke the silence. I should go. My father's expecting me. But I'll be back next week. Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning, Jack confirmed. Bring work clothes and an open mind. After everyone left, Uncle Dung driving Jack's mother and Grandma Nung back, Vinh heading to his village, Jack and Tu Tien sat in their chairs facing the field. The same chairs they'd sat in dozens of times before. The same view, but different now. Bigger. Are we really doing this? Tu Tien asked. Teaching others? Becoming some kind of farming mentors? I think we already did, Jack said. The moment we chose this life publicly, sold the house, kept the farm, made it work, we became an example, whether we wanted to or not. And now Vin, and whoever else comes after him. Yeah. They sat in silence for a while. Then Tu Tien said, I'm glad. I know it's more work, more responsibility, but I'm glad we can help. Jack thought about the journey that brought them here, the debt, the desperation, the choice between house and farm, his mother's trust, Grandma Nung's return, the restaurants that took a chance on unknown farmers, all the small decisions and lucky breaks and hard work that added up to this moment. You know what's funny? He said. What? A year ago, I measured success by contracts and revenue and market share. Now I measure it by how many people we fed today and whether the corn looks healthy. Tu Tien smiled. Better metrics. Much better. The wind chimes sang. The stars were coming out. Somewhere in the field, the corn was growing in the dark, doing its patient work. Tomorrow, there would be deliveries to make and beds to weed, and Vin coming next week to learn. There would be challenges and setbacks and seasons that didn't go as planned. But tonight, there was just this. Two people who'd chosen each other and chosen dirt and built something that mattered. Not just to them, to others too. Jack pulled Tu Tien close. She fit against him perfectly, the way she always had. Thank you, he said into her hair. For what? For believing we could do this. For planting corn when I was still figuring out the math. For making chili paste that became famous. For being the reason any of this worked. She pulled back to look at him. We're partners, remember? You chose the farm. I chose you. Everything else just grew from there. And that was the truth of it, Jack realized. The whole story in one sentence. He'd chosen land over money. She'd chosen love over security. And together, they'd grown something neither could have built alone. The farm, the business, the life, the hope that was spreading now to Vin and whoever else came seeking proof that a different path was possible. Come on, Tu Tien said, standing and pulling him up. Let's go inside. Tomorrow's Tuesday. Early delivery? They walked to the house together, hand in hand, leaving the chairs facing the field where they'd sat and planned and dreamed and built their future one conversation at a time. Inside, the marriage certificate still sat in its folder. The jars of chili paste lined the shelf. Grandma Nung's notebook, now much fuller, sat on the table next to their planting schedule and delivery routes and list of people who'd asked about learning to farm. Jack looked around at their small kitchen, at the life they'd made, at the woman beside him who'd made it all possible. And he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than that. More sustainable. Peace. The kind that comes from work that matters and love that's real, and a future that's being built one seed at a time. They'd started with nothing but debt and dirt and each other, and they'd grown it into this, a home, a business, a community forming. Something bigger than survival, something that tasted like hope and smelled like lemongrass and looked like corn reaching for the sun. Jack turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow would come early, the way it always did on a farm. There would be herbs to cut and restaurants to supply, and now apparently people to teach. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, he and Tu Tien climbed into bed in their small farmhouse, tired from a good day's work, surrounded by land that was theirs, building a life that belonged to them. And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.